and welcome back to the Yes Means Yes podcast. My name is Faith Nomchef. I am the ARP Counseling and Outreach Coordinator with Rape Counselors of East Alabama. On this week's episode, we have Miss Jess Tomlinson with Crisis Center Inc. in Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm going to let Jess introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does at Crisis Center Inc.
So my name's Jess, as Faith literally just said, but I work with the Crisis Center here in Birmingham, and I specifically work in the rape response department. My job title is the Rape Response Education and Outreach Coordinator. So what I do is go out into the community and talk about what our program is, what we do. Sometimes I'll go out and do presentations or just give people materials of our services so that they know we're here and that we know we're here for them.
Thank you. So just tell me a little bit more about, your background, how you got into this work, and how it led to what you're doing now, Jess.
It's a long story, so I'll try and keep it brief. I think a lot of the times when you're in this kind of work, you have personal experience when it comes to any kind of assault or things of that nature. And I definitely have my own story, and I won't get into that now. But once I got into college, I really started to find my voice, and I had studied journalism, but I was on the speech and debate team. And at the University of Alabama, speech and debate has more national titles than the football team. So nobody at the school knows that, but we were very proud of that.
That's awesome. Wow.
And so, yeah, they really taught me to help find my voice. And a lot of my public speeches were centered around sexual violence. So I spent a lot of time doing public events talking about that and was really passionate about it. After college, I got more into hospitality because that's what was accessible. That's what I was really used to. And I think it was last December or January that I met my executive director here at the Crisis Center. And I'd been a hospitality specialist for 6 years, working at different restaurants in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham area. And I met her just out and about, and I had on a sexual assault awareness pin. And we just got to talking, and she was like, "Hey, we don't have a job right now, but if you want to volunteer with us, then you should come in." And at the time, I was not in a good mental space. So I took some time to heal and grow. And then a couple of months later, I reached back out and she had a job. And I immediately just jumped on it.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm glad that you ran into her and that you're here today because anyone listening, Jess and I actually met a few months ago at one of the trainings that we put on, and it's been, just lovely getting to make that connection and getting to talk with you. Because Auburn is, we serve the counties of Lee, Macon, Chambers, Southwest, and Russell, but it's nice to have other connections, just throughout the state of Alabama, because we work with a lot of college kids, and after they graduate college, they move and they go to places like Birmingham. So being able to just even connect them with those resources and get ideas from other centers across the state, knowing what they're doing, what's working for them, it's great to be able to collaborate in that way. And that's part of the reason, that I had asked you on to talk more about y'all's bar outreach program. That's something that we have not really been able to get off the ground in the past, or really had anywhere to go. And we live in a college town. There's lots of bars. That's just kind of how it is. And I can imagine, living in Birmingham, living in that city, there's probably a similar environment, right? There's a bar scene, there's the downtown area. So I appreciate you, sharing your story of how you got here. And I'm curious if you don't mind sharing with us a little bit more about specifically the bar outreach program that you're doing.
Yeah. So, Bar Outreach was originally started as a program with a rape crisis center in Buncombe County in North Carolina. They started it back in 2008. And they did this after they noticed a spike in drug facilitated sexual assaults in their area. So, they took this initiative really and started kind of going out into the community and asking bartenders and hospitality specialists, things that they were already doing to help prevent sexual assault, as well as things that they could do. And we want to do the same. So it was really awesome that this rape crisis center, known as Our Voice, created like this full outline of how you get out into the community, how to get volunteers involved, the program, like what you need to be saying. It's really like to the T how you should conduct this bar outreach and how you can create a response.
And what is drug facilitated sexual assault? Do you mind
Yeah.
defining for?
So DFSA is basically sexual assault that happens from drug facilitation. And the drug facilitation essentially is used to compromise someone's ability to consent. And a lot of the times people think of like roofies, GHB, ketamine, things like that. And of course, those are all used at some point, but more often, drug facilitated sexual assault is alcohol.
Like pushing more and more shots, encouraging someone to drink, maybe even specifically targeting someone who you have seen has become to get heavily intoxicated.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think depending on the study, anywhere from 30 to 79% of sexual assaults occur with alcohol.
And we see a high number of those just with college students.
Oh, I'm sure, especially with the area being right near the university, y'all have probably similar numbers to what we see.
Lots of either met the person at the bar, leaving the bar. Very common we see a lot is something to do with the downtown area and a bar scene and drinking. Yeah, that's very very common from what I would say that we've seen with a good bit of our college age victims, which I'm assuming you probably have similar experiences.
Well, and it's discouraging to see that we know that sexual assault most often happens with people but even more often the way it happens is through DFSA.
Especially with these groups. And I mean, if you just think back to, and we're going to get a little stereotypical here, but college, that's a lot of drinking. That's a lot of, there's a party culture in college. And so very often, those things are involved, whether it's drinking or drugs. And you also have to think too, you have a lot of people coming in and for the first time. And this is like their first semester at college. This may be the first time they've ever had alcohol, right? So there's, lower tolerance. There's not really knowing your own tolerance for it and being vulnerable. That's what perpetrators prey on.
Absolutely.
So I think it's great that your organization has this sort of bar outreach, right? Where you are talking to the bars and, do you, when you're going in and training, is it the staff? Is it the owners of the bars? Is it community members? Who is the training targeted to?
So specifically, we try to reach out to hospitality specialists as a whole. Okay. If I can get bar managers, bartenders, servers, busboys, anybody that is in the restaurant or the bars, we try to reach out to them. And more so now well, I haven't been in this position terribly long. I started back in August. So I was going based off of different communities in Birmingham. We kind of have like different districts that I would go out to. And so, say there's like a cluster of restaurants and bars in Lakeview, that I'm going to go reach out to all of those different bars and restaurants and try and get them to come in. But we'll also do it where we have specific trainings for a bar or restaurant. So if they can provide incentive for their employees to come, or if they just want to have like a day to train where they're not open, then we try to do that for them too.
Okay. So it kind of sounds like you do a very similar approach to us, is where it's like, hey, if you'll come and listen to us, we'll talk.
Yeah.
That's, I feel like that's a very nonprofit mentality. Like, you know what? If you'll let us teach you, we will be there, and we will share whatever information we have. Um, in regards to who you serve, do you just serve a certain area or counties, or are you statewide? How does your the crisis center work?
So at the Crisis Center, we serve specific counties. We serve Jefferson, St. Clair, Shelby, and Walker County. With bar outreach specifically, I have been kind of more catering towards Birmingham and the Hoover area. They are very big areas to cover. And so hopefully, once I get those established and get more places under our belt, we can maybe reach out to more of those rural communities, because we can't neglect those.
I think that's, yeah, something we've worked towards, especially since COVID, right? Because now it's like, even if you can't get all your people maybe 30 minutes, an hour to our actual location, we can Zoom. Do you do it in person? Do you do it via Zoom? Would you do either?
We haven't done a Zoom training yet.
Mhm.
That might be more accessible, and I'm really glad that you brought that up. That's a really great idea. But really, I've been doing in-person trainings, and that's kind of what the organization has done in the past with the person that held my position beforehand.
Okay. So.
Because a lot of the times, like when we go in, we'll do some activities as well. And I think it just creates a more intimate dialogue when you're there with them. And especially since we're all kind of, I mean, I hate to say it because COVID's still real, but we're kind of past the
Yeah.
6 feet, like, don't come near me kind of thing.
We're going out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I agree. I think for group, any sort of like group facilitation, it's always nicer to do it in person, um, if if possible. But um,
Well,
when
we serve them lunch.
oh
So
hey, okay, yeah, that's
yeah.
incentive. Um, when you are working with these groups, tell me, is there like two? I know you said that the outline that y'all kind of have is like, very like this, step one, step two. Do you change it depending on who you're talking to? Like, say if you were talking to like a restaurant, like a higher, like, fancy Birmingham restaurant, the bartender there, would that be a different class than if you were to go into like trying to think of like a downtown bar in Birmingham, like a Tin Roof or something?
The way that we've curated the training, it's very inclusive.
Okay.
And in my experience in working in restaurants and bars, I've been from the mom and pop to the pubs to fine dining. While they all serve different clientele and conduct themselves in different ways, the way DFSA is happening in these establishments is very similar. It's just a different face and a different price point.
That makes sense. And I would also think, with the service industry, like you said, training one in one aspect doesn't mean that they're not going to need information for another, right? Because if they're kind of switching roles, and I know a lot of people who do like multiple like bartending type things, so that would make sense, and then they can like carry over the knowledge rather than it being like specific for their
Well, excuse me. The only thing that's really different
mhm.
for us is the time that we can give them the training. Because with the fine dining around this area, a lot of them have Sundays and Mondays off, which
Okay.
is great.
Mhm.
It gives them an opportunity to kind of rejuvenate from the week. But the places that aren't fine dining are working the entirety of the week. So it can be really difficult to get the entirety of the staff on board.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because when we do the trainings, if we get 70% of the staff, we have these stickers that we can give them, and they can put them on their window and say that it's a safe establishment.
Oh, okay. So that's like another incentive that you are able to do.
Mhm.
I'm curious. I have you ever had or noticed, and you may not since you're kind of like on the background, like education side. I wonder if people who are just, patrons, I wonder if they notice like restaurants that do have it and don't have it, and in their minds, like are able to distinguish, I guess, even what that means.
Unfortunately, I don't think we have enough in the community to say that there is a distinguished difference. I will say though that with bar outreach, when I go into the community and I'm trying to just like recruit people to come to the trainings, we put out these signs. I don't know if you can really see that.
Yeah, no, I can.
Um, but it says drugging someone's drink is a crime. See something, say something. And at the bottom, we have these little tear offs with our phone number so that they can reach out to us and get our services.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I've seen those before, but I think that that's probably beneficial. Do you keep them like in establishments or just around town?
So we've been going and putting them out at bars and restaurants, and 9 times out of 10, when I ask, they're like, yes, absolutely, put those up in the bathroom. And so we'll put them in individual stalls. But I will say, I'm trying to move away from this
Mm-hmm.
and get a sticker that has a QR code on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's more accessible, it's more reusable, and that way I'm not having to go to the same places over and over to replenish them.
Yeah, yeah. And that makes sense. I think a lot of places are moving to like the QR code. Um, and depending on the groups, that may be just as easy, if not easier, for them to, access it. But um, kind of switching gears just a little bit, but more focused on like the content. What is the content that you specifically go over during training sessions? Now, I mean, unfortunately, though I wish we could, we don't have time for a whole thing, but like just an overview of kind of what you'll go through with them during your trainings.
Yeah, so we start off with basics, right? Like we're going to talk about what sexual violence is, how it occurs, who's affected by it, basic statistics and things of that nature. And then we'll kind of go into the ambiguity that happens when you involve alcohol with sex.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we talk about consent and say things like consent considers fries. Consent is freely given, reversible, informed, educated, and specific.
Mm-hmm.
So we really start off with those basics, and then we go into what DFSA is. We try to make it really interactive and see if they've even heard of DFSA. Um, and of course, we kind of talk about common substances that are used, and we'll have like these sheets that we give them that go over those common substances so that they can notice the differences. Because I think a lot of the times with DFSA, regardless of if it's alcohol or rofinol, you can have someone react very similarly and look really similar to being just overly intoxicated.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so we try to teach the bartenders and hospitality specialists to have this mindset of radical empathy and to look at their guests and say, hey, like, are you just really drunk, or is something wrong here? Do I need to take a deeper look?
Mhm.
And so after that, we'll go into some common misconceptions,
Mhm.
and then we'll talk about bystander intervention and the 4Ds of bystander intervention, which is direct, distract, delegate, and delay. And finally, after all of that, we'll have a activity where they're given scenarios, and we just kind of talk about how they would react in those situations and what they would do.
And so we actually have some bystander training. We also use the D's. So I was actually able to recognize what you were talking about there. But when you work with these groups, how receptive would you say that they are to just what y'all are teaching them?
So, to be fair, I've only done 2 trainings so far since I am still very fresh to this. I do a lot of different trainings throughout the year.
Hmm.
So with bar outreach, I've only gotten to do 2, unfortunately. But there are more to come, Birmingham. Do not fret.
Okay, okay.
Um, as far as receptiveness to it, I'm learning that it really depends on the season. So,
Okay.
like, November and December was very difficult to get anybody at all to come because it's the holiday season. The hospitality world is incredibly booked and busy during that time.
Mhm.
Um, but when I go out and talk to them, they seem to be very receptive. They're listening. They let us put up our signs in their bathrooms, which is great. But I find that even in the past, before I was in this position, that the classes are very small.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so a lot of the times it takes someone's personal initiative and personal interest in this kind of issue to really say, hey, I'm going to come out to this. I'm going to take, the one Saturday that I have off to go and learn about sexual violence.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think what you're describing is a very real barrier to lots of things that we face, trying to do outreach and education programs in our field, because you're right, it does take someone actually wanting to make a change and wanting to better themselves to be there and having the time to do it, having transportation to do it. Um, so yeah, that can definitely, make it difficult. When you do have people who, take the time, are able to come in, whether that's, work incentive or their own personal thing, are they communicative? Are they like engaged? I'm curious how people react because, okay, our name is Rape Counselors of East Alabama, right? We go to events, people run away from our table because it has the word rape on it. That we've just kind of, the average person is probably going to be like, oh, it's not, a word that they see every day. Unlike you and me, who we're working in this, we're kind of, used to it, used to talking about the hard stuff. So in those classes, are people open? Are they talking? Are they kind of timid?
Gosh, wow. And I have that reaction because it takes me back to the classes where I try to make it really accessible, and I try to have some lighthearted things in there. The consent tea video.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the industry knows this video where it's like consent is easy as making somebody a cup of tea. If they
Mm-hmm.
don't want tea, they wanted tea last week, doesn't mean that they want tea next week, right? Like, we get that. So I try to like throw some things in there, throw like rape myths in there that are just ridiculous, like
Mm-hmm.
that if you consent to something once, it means you have ongoing consent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the thought of that is exhausting. No, that's not true. But back to your question, as far as how people react and how they feel about it, a lot of the times you get those like really quiet during the sessions and they're just like, wow, oh my God. Or you have people who will be like, just cursing, like saying that's effed up or things of that nature. Because it is hospitality, so they're a little more rugged sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's a safe space, right? Like when I have these conversations, I try to remind people that it's difficult to talk about this kind of stuff. So if they need to take a break, then they're more than welcome to. They can walk out, they can leave if they need to. Um, and they can have whatever reaction
Mhm.
they feel is appropriate, because sexual assault is really difficult to talk about, but the fact that we do have these conversations means that we're starting to create change.
Mhm. Mhm. No, 100%. Um, I agree with that. I'm glad to hear that people seem to be open to it at the very least, right? Like you're doing trainings and you're having people showing up, and I think, right, I think that's great. Like sometimes that's all we can ask for is people to show up, and then okay, we've got it from here.
Yeah.
Just even planting that seed. Hmm.
Well, I've had my December training, I didn't have anybody show up.
Hmm.
And, it sucks putting in all this work and then not seeing people there, but it just, I think, helps me to kind of better curate how to make this more accessible. Like you said, maybe doing Zoom or something like that, or going into the restaurants and bars individually, and particularly the ones that we're seeing come to our center, or I should say people come to our center and have services done. If they mention a specific place, then I can go to them and say, hey, do you want a training? Not outing the survivor or anything like that, but just going to those specific ones that are mentioned and making sure that you keep an extra eye on them.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. Um, I mean, you do often see names come up repeatedly. At least in our experience, we have, there's just some places and bars that it's like, okay, we hear that name a lot. So I think it's great that, you do have an opportunity to say, hey, I heard that name. And also I can now go and at least try to get some information to them, to do a training, even just drop off resources, because we know it's happening or has happened there
Yeah.
or around there. So I think that that's good, and I'm glad that it seems to be people are at least, if not receptive, not rude.
Yeah.
Hmm.
They're not just like, no, please don't put that material up in our bathrooms, which of course, like I have anxiety. So every time I go in, I'm like, they're just going to be like, no, we don't want that.
Yeah, yeah. People, for the most part, I would say, are sometimes I think they're just afraid to say no to us when we show up because they're like, what does that mean about me? Or what is, I'm gonna look
Yeah.
bad if I say no to this. I'm like, whatever, if it gets the resource out there. Um, but yeah, I think that that is gonna be always a struggle in our field, but someone's gotta do it. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Well, um, I really, just appreciate you in general coming on and talking about this. I appreciate the work that you're doing in the Birmingham area because I think Birmingham is a great city, but as all big cities are, there's lots of people, and usually that's when a lot of crime happens. And having those spaces like bars, and there's a college, and sometimes it just creates environments for assault to happen. But I'm glad that they have resources like y'all there, and that they have moving in the right direction. That's all we can really ask for. There's not going to be changes overnight. There never is, but us kind of taking everything in the right direction, I think, is the most that we can ask for at this point.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome how you were able to like merge your hospitality and then also sexual violence. Like this sounds like the most like perfect like intersection of that with the bar outreach.
It really did work out for me. And I kind of, have a connection with some of the fine dining establishments here. I know a lot of people in the hospitality
Mhm.
industry here, and I'm still friends with people that work in it. So it really helps me in my position now to kind of even facilitate this more and create a broader reach. So I'm
Mhm.
hoping with this year, after we get through April and Sexual Assault Awareness Month,
Mhm.
because I don't know about you, I'm sure y'all are going to be just as busy as we are trying to just put stuff together and have events.
That is the plan. Yes. Yeah. That's our um looking for anyone who's listening. That is an April Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so definitely be looking out for things from us, things from Birmingham. If you're in Birmingham, all centers try to put on a bunch of events during that month just to raise awareness. Just as like a side note, good plug there, because that'll be perfect. This comes out in February, and we can
Yeah.
um, get people already excited for our stuff. Um, so this is something that I ask everyone who is a podcast guest before we end our session. So this is a question that I have for all of our guests before they leave the podcast, and that is, what is your message to survivors?
So, as a representative of the Crisis Center, our message is that we believe you. That is the biggest thing. We believe you, we support you, and whether you were assaulted yesterday, 3 weeks ago, or a year ago, we are here for every part of your journey. You are not alone in this, and we'll help support you through it.
Awesome. And Jess, I want to give this opportunity to you to plug any social medias for your organization or any contact information for you or resources that you think um, would be good if anyone wants to get in contact with you, wants to get more info about the training.
Yes. So if you want to reach the Crisis Center or are curious about what we do, you can definitely check out our website, crisiscenterbham.org. We're also on Facebook at Crisis Center Inc. My phone number at the office is 205-323-7736. So you can reach me there, or you can check out my email, jtomlinson@crisiscenterbham.org. Definitely reach out to me if you want to do a training, if you have questions, or just need to talk to somebody. You can always call us at our 24/7 rape response phone number. That is 323-RAPE or 7273. We're open 24/7, 365. So if you're in the Birmingham area or one of the counties that we mentioned, then please call us. We're available to you. And of course, if you're in the Auburn area, then definitely reach out to Faith and her people.
Thank you, Jess, so much for joining us today, for talking with us. Honestly, just even talking to you has given me ideas for our community in the Auburn and surrounding areas. And I hope anyone else listening kind of feels the same. Um, I
And if
appreciate.
you, I think I sent you the materials, but if you'd like,
Mhm.
we can definitely send those back to you. This is something that we purchased.
Mhm.
So any crisis centers that need that, please reach out to me and we can help facilitate that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you really so much for the information and your expertise in this. And I'm definitely excited about the prospects, and hopefully, this has reached a couple of people who now have some ideas themselves. Um, Thank you to our listeners, anyone who, supports us. And that is it for this podcast. We will see you on the next one. Thanks again, Jess.
Thank you.
Bye.